Good morning. Welcome to this online worship service with the Unitarian Universalist Church in Surprise, Arizona. I am the Reverend Terry Sims, and I am delighted to serve UU Surprise as its minister. Due to the continuing danger of coronavirus infection, we are still not meeting in person in accordance with the guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. However, we are looking forward and making plans to meet again in person just as soon as we can do so safely. In the meantime, we remind ourselves that this church is more than its building and seeing each other in person. We carry our community within our hearts. We show it in our care for each other and in how we live in this world. The purpose of our faith community continues, as does its spirit, whether we are in our building or not. As I said last week in anticipation of Thanksgiving, I am thankful for every one of you, members, friends, and online friends, who faithfully watch our online services each week and continue to participate in other online church activities. Thank you for that support, as well as your continued financial contributions. Each of you is sustaining our community through this pandemic, allowing it to continue to thrive as we look forward to being together again in person. As I also mentioned last week, because so many of us have continued to make our pledge payments and even increased them, it looks like we have a good chance to end this very challenging year with close to a balanced budget. That is remarkable. Something we did for ourselves and each other. Last week, I said that our church is investing in cameras and a new soundboard that will allow us to live stream services and meetings from our sanctuary in real time, rather than by recording them in advance. We hope to start that new way of doing services perhaps as soon as January 10th, and continue doing so even after we start meeting again in person. The reason we have made this commitment is that it will allow our community to continue to reach all those members and friends who are not able to be with us physically on Sunday mornings. That's all of us at the moment, of course. But when we start meeting again in person, live streaming our services and other meetings will let us stay connected to those who travel, those who are not feeling well, and those who have never visited us except online. The cost of the improvements to let us live stream is almost $10,000, but it is an investment in finding new ways to reach out with this life-enhancing faith of ours. If you want to be a part of that investment and outreach and are able to do so, I would encourage you to make an additional gift by the end of 2020 toward that goal. And now, as I light the chalice here in our sanctuary, I would invite you to join me in saying the words we use for that purpose. With its beauty and grace and strength, may this flaming chalice remind us of our highest aspirations, our deepest commitments, and our most earnest intentions. Would you also join me in our affirmation? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. We enter into our time of worship with our prelude, Tempus Fugit, by Moises Nieto, played by our own Kent Trostel, piano. Carried upward by Kent's prelude, I offer these opening words by the Reverend John Saxon, called "Listen, the Spirit is Calling." Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night, in times of hope and despair. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name and has many different names. The Spirit of life, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you and to me. It's calling us to greater witness, greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, greater love. It's calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves, in others, and in the world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and dance and sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. It's calling us into community. It's calling us into the greater life of all. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. All this month of November, we have been wrestling with what spirituality is and what part it plays in our faith and in our lives. Introducing our theme, the Reverend Kirk Lodeman Copeland wrote, Einstein said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious." And yet many of us miss it most of the time. This is the point of Rainer Maria Rilke's 1924 poem entitled A Walk. He writes, "My eyes already touch the sunny hill, going far ahead of the road I have begun. So we are grasped by what we cannot grasp. It has its inner light, even from a distance, and changes us, even if we do not reach it, into something else, which, hardly sensing it, we already are. A gesture waves us on, answering our own wave. But what we feel is the wind in our faces." It's a very simple poem. It's just about a walk up a hill in sunlight. Except, he says, we are grasped by what we cannot grasp. These epiphanies, these peak experiences, these moments of grace, these spiritual experiences change us, Rilke says, into something we already are. Isn't all life change in which each change seeks to bring us closer to our true nature? Yet most of the time we miss what is happening. Life or God or mystery, you choose the name to call what is most precious and most profound. But it waves to us, beckoning. What we feel is the wind on our faces. We are grasped by what we cannot grasp. by mystery, by love, by the spirit of life itself. Such is the nature of spirituality. But what we feel is the wind in our faces. Spirituality involves a heightened sense of connection with the deepest part of oneself, with others, and with a transcendent reality. Whether that is understood as nature, the unfolding universe, God, or as the Seventh Unitarian Universalist principle affirms, the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. In the end, spirituality has to do with the cultivation of the inner life that we might live and act with more authenticity, integrity, humility, and compassion in the world. It is a gateway to transformation. That's the end of Lodman Copeland's quotation. Joseph Sittler said, "Spirituality, the power, presence, dynamics of the Spirit, is not a definable reality." Quoting Sittler in his book, Faith and Theology, A Humanist Spirituality, the Reverend Kenneth Pfeiffer said, "The truth of that statement, that it is not a definable reality, is what makes spirituality so elusive. That which is not a thing, which is not material, has no spatial extension, is hard to define, hard to contain, impossible to measure. Spirituality, like love, defies all efforts to encompass it within the boundaries of defined logic, language, or usage." What then shall we say of spirituality, Pfeiffer asks? 6 things. 1, spirituality is a process. It is a process that moves us toward that which is beyond description, the very nature of reality itself. It is about the journey, not the arrival. 2, it is also an attitude toward reality. Part of what is involved in spirituality is a stance, a commitment, a will. What we see and understand is partly determined by what we are trying to see and understand. Whatever the ultimate truth may be, we are both aided and limited in our finite grasp of it by what we expect to find. 3, spirituality is also an experience. We know life not just from thinking about it, but also, and far more importantly, from living it. Spirituality is not a shallow piety of mere words and gestures, and it cannot be known vicariously. Each of us must develop our own spirit, and do so by living, feeling, and helping to make a better world. 4, spirituality is awareness. It is awareness of the self, unique, precious, fearful, full of hope, the same across years and yet ever-changing and always difficult to grasp. It is awareness of what we are: body, mind, emotions, and what we dream of becoming. It is time spent alone, pondering our frailties and our passions and our growth. It is also awareness of the transcendence of time, of space and matter. It is awareness of the vastness beyond imagination of the universe. Spirituality is awareness of mystery. It is awareness that life is full of paradox and contradiction. It is awareness of the miracle of growth. It is awareness of the sheer wonder of existence, of the fact that there is something and not nothing, however it all came to be. 5. Spirituality is also a bond. It is a bond with nature. It is a recognition that we humans are part of the world of nature, part of the way that life has happened on this planet so full of life. Reverence for life was Albert Schweitzer's phrase for the spiritual bond we have with nature. Spirituality is also a bond with humankind. It is seen in our reaching out to other people to connect, physically touching and hugging, but more importantly, in the relationship we call love. It is the sense of responsibility we feel and the joy we take in being parents and grandparents. It is the special glow of warmth and intimacy we feel with our lover. It is the respect and honor we give our parents. It is the discovery of the humanity of another person across national, linguistic, gender, racial, age, or philosophical barriers. 6. Spirituality is as well a deed, an act of creativity, a caring deed. It is the perception of and the struggle for justice. It is, as Joanna Macy has taught us, the willingness to bear the pain known by others. Victims of crime, disease, or natural disaster, those scarred by war, of the loss of job or family. Spirituality is, in Matthew Fox's phrase, creative compassion. So, to recap Pfeiffer's description, spirituality is a process, an attitude, an experience, an awareness, a bond, and a deed. Today, I want to think of those aspects of spirituality as present throughout our lives, as a home we can always return to because it never leaves us. Spirituality is always with us if we are open to it, and spirituality begins in childhood. It all began with a young boy lying in bed, recovering from a bad cold, the Reverend Tim Temerson wrote in Skepticism and Awe, The Spiritual Life of Albert Einstein. The boy's father gives him a small gift, in this case, a magnetic compass. The boy marvels at the compass and its needle, which seems to move magically, as if influenced by some hidden force or unseen reality. The boy is so amazed and astonished by the compass and by that mysterious force that he begins to tremble with excitement. That young boy was Albert Einstein, and his encounter with that compass when he was 5 years old marked the beginning of an incredible lifelong journey to understand those hidden forces and unseen realities. I can almost see the young Einstein holding that compass in his hand, perhaps walking back and forth, and watching the needle magically move in one direction and then another. How is that possible, he wonders? What is causing the needle to point in different directions as I carry the compass back and forth? Reflecting back on this moment many years later, Einstein himself recalled that watching the compass needle move led him to conclude that some force or some reality had to be behind all things. And the search for that mysterious force, that unseen reality, which Einstein would come to call God and which filled him with awe and wonder, that search became the defining quest not only of his scientific career, but also of his spiritual life and journey. As his encounters with modern science increased, Einstein's passion for religious ritual and observance waned. But his hunger to understand the unseen, the mysterious, what he liked to call the mind of God, that spiritual hunger did not diminish. Instead, it merged with his scientific quest, a quest that eventually led Einstein to redefine our understanding of the physical world and to help us get a glimpse, albeit small, into the mind of God. It was in the unraveling of those mysteries that Einstein's spiritual journey found its greatest depth and meaning. The more Einstein explored, discovered, and learned about the universe, the more he felt connected to and at home in it. Science became for Einstein a path to religious and even mystical experience, a path to awe at the reality of a universe of harmony and regularity, and wonder and amazement at a universe that will always remain at some level a mystery. The Reverend Temerson goes on, and there was something else extraordinary about Einstein's spiritual journey. The more connected he felt to the harmony and the mystery of the cosmos, the more connection and compassion he felt for his fellow human beings. For much of his adult life, Albert Einstein was a passionate advocate for human rights, for freedom of conscience and thought, and for world peace. And Einstein's commitment to those values was part and parcel of his scientific and religious outlook. He believed that a set of physical laws and principles had produced the harmony and the beauty of the cosmos. And he felt that a set of common ethical values and principles, values like freedom, peace, and justice, could create harmony and beauty within the human family. Lynn Jessup wrote about the spirituality of her own child. I was driving my 2 children to their child care providers one morning last week when I realized my 2-year-old was being uncharacteristically quiet. Trying to pick his brain, I asked, "What are you thinking about?" I expected perhaps a one-word answer, an "I don't know," or a response that had nothing to do with what I'd asked. "I'm thinking about God," he replied softly, looking directly at me. It was one of those exceedingly rare moments in child rearing when you get back what you've asked for 10 times over. First, you're shocked, then you marvel. Parents sometimes forget, Jessup writes, that children are spiritual beings, many believe from birth. Harvard psychiatrist Robert Coles, in his book, The Spiritual Life of Children, describes children as, quote, young human beings, profane as can be one minute, but the next, spiritual. Jessup says that's perhaps the best description of a 2-year-old ever written. It's the spirit that children are about, Coles and other experts say. It's natural for them, says John Westerhoff, Duke University professor of theology and Christian nurture, and author of Will Our Children Have Faith? Children's first spiritual experiences are intuitive, as is most of their early learning. They can't do the intellectualizing until much later, Westerhoff says, but that doesn't mean they're not experiencing or knowing it. He says children grow in spirituality in 3 basic areas: through nature, the arts, and ritual. They have a natural awe of flowers and stars and birds, for example, and a natural fear of phenomena such as thunderstorms. They love music and dance, and they appreciate ritual. Just try to get away without reading that bedtime story. Rather than be preoccupied with their children's spirituality, Westerhoff says, parents should turn their scrutiny inward. Don't worry about your children. Worry about yourselves, he says. What children do is observe the adults in their lives. The New Testament had something to say about children, as it does on many matters of life. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 1 through 3, says, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' Jesus called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, 'Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.'" There are various interpretations of this short section, as there are with many biblical passages. The interpretation I heard most often growing up was that Jesus was urging adults to have a childlike faith, simple, unquestioning, totally dependent on God and God's grace. That interpretation never made much sense to me. But when I think about a child's spirituality, I see the wisdom in the exhortation to become like little children. Because children have an innate ability to wonder and to be amazed. That's as good a key to heaven as I know. Having an abiding sense of the spiritual seems to come naturally to children, but adults seem to have to make time to discover it or rediscover it. When we do, it can feel that we are returning to a place we know, that feels like the only home we ever had or will ever need. I wonder if spirituality might save us. When we are at each other's throats, as we are politically in this country, might it be because we have lost both a spiritual connection with the universe and with each other? That we do not cultivate a sense of wonder at the marvel of existence? Before they are corrupted by seeing how adults live, children do have a sense of wonder, of connection with the mysteries and beauties of the universe around them. But I am afraid that we often pass to children this upside-down view of what is important in life. As adults, I think too many of us live spiritually impoverished lives, seeking secular abundance instead in the individual pursuits of power, fame, wealth, accomplishment. Those reinforce our sense of isolation from others and in our children, and it is too often not about our worth as one part connected to the whole. It is instead based on how important we as individuals are apart from the interdependent web of all existence, instead of being a part of that web. As if our lives and accomplishments would last forever. The disservice we do to our children stems from the disservice we do to ourselves. We do not need to worry about our children's spirituality, which they come by naturally. We need to worry about why we adults seem to lose or ignore it, and that our children learn that by observing us. The other day, just before sunset, I watched a flock of birds in my backyard take off in a group to fly away from me. Then they banked to the left in unison to circle back so that I saw their white undersides rather than their darker wings. Their flight was synchronized, graceful, beautiful. And it occurred to me in that moment that I was probably the only person who saw and the only consciousness that could appreciate what I saw. Annie Dillard's quotation came back to me. We are here to abet creation and to witness it, to notice each thing so each thing gets noticed. Together we notice not only each mountain shadow and each stone on the beach, but we notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature. so that creation need not play to an empty house. In her sermon, When I Was a Child, the Reverend Jean Nuyar wrote, "When I was a child, the world felt safe and whole and meaningful to me. It reached out and embraced me in a comfortable, welcoming, protective way. I felt at home in the world," to borrow from the title we use for one of our church school curricula. I did have a spiritual life as a child, as all children have spiritual lives. Feelings of awe, wonder, compassion, experiences of connection, of transcendence, mystical experiences, images that hold theological meanings. The fields and forest were my playground, as they have been for generations of children and still are for a lucky few. I can remember moments of lying in a meadow with grass and wildflowers tall above me, vast sky overhead, insects buzzing and brushing by me, moments of near dissolution into the earth, the sky, the grasses, of feeling that the boundary between me and the meadow was a permeable boundary, not clearly defined by the layer of skin on my body, but a gentle merging of me into it into me. I think it is appropriate to name such moments mystical, interludes of feeling a transcendent sense of oneness with something larger than myself. Listen to this poem from Shel Silverstein. Once I spoke the language of the flowers. Once I understood each word the caterpillar said. Once I smiled in secret at the gossip of the starlings and shared a conversation with the housefly in my bed. Once I heard and answered all the questions of the crickets and joined the crying of each falling, dying flake of snow. Once I spoke the language of the flowers. How did it go? How did it go? We know with childhood certainty, we know, and then we forget. I will leave you with this. In a Montessori blog, Jennifer Rogers wrote The Spiritual Life of Children, a December story. Sammy had just finished reading the introduction to our Parts of the Frog booklet. Definition booklets are usually challenging for our 5-year-old readers. Some of the vocabulary was new to Sammy, but he sailed through the reading with ease. He paused once at the end of the first page to comment and ask a question. "This is really interesting," Sammy said. "I'd like to be a scientist when I grow up." "Do you think I could be a scientist?" he asked. "Of course I do." It was a too easy response from his teacher, but it was true and honest. You are interested in the things scientists are interested in. "I think so too," Sammy said, thoughtful and sincere. "I don't believe God would let a little boy like me want to be a scientist if I couldn't really be one." Sammy resumed his reading. I continued listening, balancing tears on my eyelids. There are layers of beauty, confidence, faith, and trust in Sammy's comments. I will remember his words, I thought, through the darkest days of December. His comment reminded me that I have learned as much as I have taught. Several days after his first wanderings, Sammy told one of his friends he thought he would be a scientist. "I want to learn about everything in the world," he said. "I know I can't learn everything, but I think I can try." Krista Tippett interviewed Dr. Robert Coles, the Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize-winning author, for On Being. Dr. Coles said, "I think that that's the challenge to all of us, not to forget our childhood and its possibilities. The positive side of childhood is its yearning interest in the world, almost unquenchable appetite for finding out about things and experiencing them. To explore this universe, which is our task. Isn't that what religions tell us? To explore the world? And to realize and fulfill our individual humanity as citizens of this planet, lucky enough to be here, given that chance for a few years of human experience, which is what a life is." I think we can be led back to the home our children know, the spiritual sense of mystery, awe, and wonder, the capacity for which never leaves us, even if we sometimes leave it. May we all find our way back home to the spirituality that is our nature and our highest calling. Blessed be.
Standing by the ocean, looking out to sea, I feel at home here. It sets my spirit free. Drifting in my mind I go, sailing in my dreams. As close am I to paradise, a sweet serenity. Spirit dances, lost in a melody, the sound of the ocean, such a healing symphony. Spirit dances, lost in this reverie, the song in my heart sings, echoed by the ocean breeze. At last I'm free. Whenever I'm here, it purifies, it clears my troubled mind. A sweet return to innocence, it awakes my inner child. I dance with free abandon on a sea of endless dreams. There's no place I feel quite the same, so weightless and so free. Spirit dances, lost in a melody, the sound of the ocean, such a healing symphony. Spirit dances, lost in this reverie, the song in my heart sings, echoed by the ocean breeze. At last I'm free. Free, that's all I wanted to be. Standing by the ocean, I can finally touch the dream. Free, that's all I wanted to be. Standing by the ocean, I can finally touch the dream. dances, lost in a melody, the sound of the ocean, such a healing symphony. Spirit dances, lost in this revelry, the song in my heart sings, echoed by the ocean breeze. At last I'm free. At last I'm free.